Heartland, a voice of the people, by the people, and for the people. This is the Jake Merrick Show.
Good morning, and I'm here in studio with Representative Tom Gann. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. How are you today?
Amazing. I'm so glad you're able to come in this morning.
I am so excited to be here, and I just want to thank you for doing the show and with what Freedom 96.9 is going to become. It's just great to have conservative talk radio that you can trust and listen to.
Absolutely. Great station. I'm so blessed to be a part of it. You know, an amazing lineup all day long, and so I just feel honored to be able to lead the morning off and really speak to Oklahomans and the issues impacting us as a state. That's really what's on my mind.
And then having that background that you've had in the Senate, knowing what it's like to be an elected official, that means a lot to have that perspective.
Right. I mean, just see God's hand at work. You know, I'm just thankful. And I'm thankful for you and all the work you're doing, you know, in light of everything Michael McGuire said earlier on the Market Monday update, talking about the economy, the crazy policies coming down from the White House that will impact us as a state. I think our conversation is a perfect follows it perfectly, talking about Pryor, Oklahoma, this effort. The governor's been, obviously, this has been part of his campaign strategy, is making Oklahoma a top 10 state. And I believe what he means specifically by that is economically. And we've seen this in this efforts to bring in Panasonic and the efforts to bring in Volkswagen and now Enel, a solar panel company. And so I've been very outspoken in opposition to these things because I've been saying even though you might bring 4,000 jobs, how does that impact our culture? When you have a huge corporation, 4,000 families now being influenced by ESG policies, pro-LGBTQ policies, I think that eventually that's going to turn around and bite Oklahoma in the butt. I think that's going to turn a very red state into a very purple state over a period of time, if not blue. And so that's my concern. So I'm curious because these companies, that when they're looking at them, they're talking about bringing them to Pryor, Oklahoma, which is your district. And so the thing that's on my mind is, what is the people of Pryor? What are the people of Pryor saying about this? Are they in support of this or in opposition of this?
The people in Pryor are very concerned about this, and your byline here on the radio station is "We the people, for the people,
That's
by
right.
the people." And for the past 18 months, we've been living for the corporation, by the corporation, and that seems to be the emphasis here. They're very little concerned about what the people really think, and through the process when the LEAD Act was announced and that this Project Ocean was going to come and land in Pryor, the TIF portion of that, the Tax Incremental Financing District, was designed to do the infrastructure. And so when the people of Pryor got wind of that, they were very concerned about having their ad valorem tax dollars subsidizing the development in the park.
Yeah. So speak to this, the TIF issue. I wanted to get to it, but I think that it may actually set the groundwork, and it was in place prior to this effort to bring in like the LEAD Act and the ocean, right?
Well, they kind of all dovetailed together.
Okay.
They had the incentives for canoe, and then they had the TIF, which was going to be the Mays County portion of it to bring infrastructure development inside the park, and then you had Project Ocean and the LEAD Act.
Right. Okay.
It was the TIF that they were very concerned about because that redirects your ad valorem tax dollars that would normally go to your traditional sources of funding within the county to a specific development aspect in the park.
Right.
They felt like that the park should be doing that already, and they should take the park revenues to develop that. And then the whole TIF process was problematic in that they were grooming people for a yes answer. They had specific people on the committee that had vested interest in if the TIF was successful. A lot of conflict of interest, and then just a lack of information through the people standing behind the non-disclosure agreements. So you couple all that, they vote the TIF in, and the people say, no, we didn't get our information. This was a sham process, so we're going to take it and we're going to file an initiative petition, which they did, spent some money, raised some money, got it on the ballot, and then defeated the TIF by a county-wide vote by over 60%.
Wow.
63%, I think, was the exact number.
That was Mays County?
Yes, Mays County. It did not pass in any single precinct in Mays County.
Wow.
Mays County was saying, look, we want economic development, but you're not going to redirect our tax dollars into a private corporation like Panasonic
and
have us pay for it for 23 years. Google over there, they receive $40 million a year in ad valorem reimbursement, and that's the reimbursement that everybody in the state pays. And this gets back to the premise of this whole economic development, is that why in the world are we subsidizing anybody through our tax dollars?
That's it. Yeah, the public-private partnership is problematic.
It is very problematic, and we are struggling to even get an ear with our elected leaders down at the state capitol to talk about giving the people's money back. They want to give it away to corporations. We'd really like to give it back to the people by which it came from. But that's a hard discussion to have down at the state capitol.
Yeah. Excuse me. So with the entrance or the call for these huge companies coming in, one of the things that I was very opposed to is the carve-out with the LEAD Act. And this happened with both Panasonic and Volkswagen, where it seems like we're picking winners and losers. This was not a general provision for any company that qualified. It was very, very narrow and specific, so that only Panasonic would qualify for these certain provisions. And then the same thing happened with Volkswagen. And I was opposed to that when I was in the Senate, voted against Panasonic because I believe you're carving out a place for one specific company to come in, and really you leaves everyone else out. And I think that was a complaint coming from your area. It was not in that the existing manufacturers are saying, what about us? I mean, we could use some help.
When you specialize in something of that magnitude, when you're going to drop a 5 million square foot facility that makes batteries in your park and try to change the overall economic environment with which everybody has to play in the park, that specialization will warp everything out of shape, and you'll compete for labor, which will be detrimental to those that don't have that incentive. Because if you give these incentives, because they're not only getting the $698 million, but they're also getting workforce development, ad valorem reimbursement, the whole slate of incentives that the state of Oklahoma offers, and that warps the market, and they compete for labor, and it could possibly run out the businesses that you have there, and it creates an unlevel playing field.
Right.
And so when government interjects, when it gets out of its lane and tries to develop economically the area over there, you're going to
the free market is out of whack now. It's no longer based on just supply and demand. It's based on who has that support with the government.
Right. Who has the connections down at the state capitol that can swing a deal?
Yeah, very concerning. We're here with Representative Tom Gann talking about the TIF Act, the TIF reforms that were put in place. Also, the big businesses that have been brought in to Pryor, Oklahoma. Currently, Google is there. There was an effort to bring in Panasonic, then Volkswagen, and now I wish we could stop talking about it, but the keeps on coming. We're looking at Enel now, another solar panel company. So we're going to dig into who is Enel. Would it be good for Oklahoma? Guys, welcome back. It's Monday morning, 7:35 a.m. I'm here with Representative Tom Gann. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning.
So glad to have you. I'm getting tongue-tied this morning. Must have had a really good weekend. It was nice and relaxing. Hope you did too. But we're starting Monday strong. And, hey, we're here with Representative Gann talking about this, the effort to bring in big business to Oklahoma. Is this a plus or a minus? Is it a positive or a negative? I've been in opposition to this, so I'm glad to hear, because you represent the area that would receive these companies, Pryor, Oklahoma, Mays County. Currently, Google resides there.
Yes.
And, I'm concerned because if you saw the recent interview with Elon Musk, then we saw Elon talking about the concerns he has with AI, and he's an investor and a leader in the creation of AI, and he's so concerned about AI. He's actually said that this will be the demise of humanity is AI. Interesting that he's developing it and also sounding the alarm against it. But then he mentioned Google and how they intend to use AI to, basically become God, become our source. Did you hear that interview?
I heard a portion of the interview with Tucker Carlson.
Right.
And
that was, yes. Elon Musk was with Tucker. That's right.
And Elon Musk, how it also relates here economically, is he's one of the biggest receivers of federal subsidies for Tesla. And yet he bemoans the fact that this is not a good practice to have. Yeah. And then that's what we're really all wrapped up in, are all these incentives going to all these companies that they're wanting to try to take and transform our economy into this clean energy economy that's really not driven by consumer demand, but by the Biden administration.
Yeah.
This is Biden's green agenda.
You mentioned that Google receives $40 million
Yes.
From the state of Oklahoma.
Yes.
So then how, it seems then when that's the case, it's almost like the tail wagging the dog. You know, when they receive so much money and become so powerful in the state, are they now dictating policies in the legislature? I mean, that would be my concern.
Well, when you look at some of the studies that have been done by George Mason University and also the Heritage Foundation and 1889 Institute,
right,
which is no longer in Oklahoma anymore, but these studies say that these companies, they come in and they make all these promises and then they don't always really deliver on what they say they're going to do, and they always parse it back.
Yes. You know, these public-private partnerships, I just mentioned in the last segment, and I've said it before, these are of concern because, you know, whenever you have a huge corporation receiving taxpayer money, and then they go back to the legislature and say, hey, what do you need? We can make it happen. Then you have this very unhealthy relationship between a corporation and the legislature. So, you know, speaking of taxpayer money, this tax credit with education has been an area of concern for a lot of people. It's been in the headlines, obviously, the back and forth between the Senate and the House. And currently we have a possible compromise issued by the governor.
Yes. The governor's compromise was kind of a mix between what the Senate had and then what the House had. And, of course, the tax credits are the big thing. But you have to understand these are individual tax credits from individual people who spend their dollar first. Yeah. And then they receive that tax credit based upon how much they spend.
Okay. So are you liking this new compromise?
Oh, yes. I think that's a good compromise way to get parents the choice that they need for public education or private education or homeschooling. It involves all three levels. And then on the other end, the public schools are getting a good deal of more money that some of it funnels through the formula, and then some of it is just given outright for those that are not in the formula.
It does seem like it touches everyone, those in public schools, private schools, and homeschooling.
Yes, and the only thing I didn't like about the credits, but there was a income cap, but that income cap is relation to the overall spending cap of the credit. So if it goes over the spending cap of the credit, then the income credit or cap comes into play, and then after 3 years it'll go away. I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think it's a good compromise.
Okay. So I'm looking here at the graphic that Governor Stitt posted on Twitter, and it shows $300 million going to the Oklahoma Student Fund, $300 million to all school districts and teacher pay raises.
Yes.
And then $200 million to Oklahoma Parental Choice Tax Credit.
Yes.
And so
the difference in those 300, one's going through the formula, and it filters down the formula like any money that the state would send to education, and then the other money, the other 300, then goes to the schools based upon their average daily membership.
Okay, for the teacher pay raises and the and then the $200 million would go towards Oklahoma Parental Choice Tax Credit.
Yes, that's the cap. That's the $200 million cap. That if that's exceeded, then the $250,000 cap on income would kick in.
Okay,
and so anybody underneath that would get priority. But then if it goes back under, then it's available to everybody.
Okay. That's good to know. So it looks like this might get past the finish line?
It might. I hope that the Senate can get on board with this plan, because it's got some really good stuff in it that they wanted, and then like the caps, and then the House, of course, is we're all over it. We're ready to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think it seems more likely that's going to get through here. I mean, there was concern that it would fall dead once again this year, and then nothing would be done. But it looks like this will go forward, and we'll see how this impacts the state and education.
Yeah, and so the homeschoolers, the difference to their tax credit was it was going to be per family by the Senate version, but then they've gone back went back to individual kids receiving the tax credit.
Okay.
And that's another point that was brought out that they went back to, and I think that's a winnable deal for everybody.
Now, I know that a lot of people in the homeschool community are hesitant, to say the least, of taking any kind of taxpayer money, any kind of tax credit, anything from the government because of the potential strings attached. So what would you say to them, to the homeschooling community?
Well, I'd say this is your money. You spend it first, and then if you want to take those receipts and try to get credit for it, you have the available, just like you do with your home mortgage.
Okay.
It's the same thing, that you get the deduction off your tax.
Okay.
That.
All right. Well, we're a homeschool family as well, and we also have a daughter in private school. So we're going to be taking a look at this if it does pass and see how it might benefit us. Yeah. I jumped ahead to the tax credit here before I finished the conversation about prior, because I did want to talk about Enel. This is the recent company that they're recruiting to come to Oklahoma. Now, after the Volkswagen quote-unquote loss, I don't consider it a loss. I think it's a win for Oklahoma. But when the Senate lost the bid to get Volkswagen here and they opted to go to Ontario instead, then Senate Pro Tem Greg Treat put together a committee to do better, to help recruit these companies and ensure that we get them in Oklahoma. And for me, that was a sign that they were out of touch. The Senate was out of touch with the people, because I think at large the people are saying, we don't want these liberal companies in Oklahoma. Yet we see in the Senate doing more to get them here.
Isn't it ironic that we have passed legislation to require our state treasurer, to divest out of ESG companies that are hostile to Oklahoma, yet we fall head over heels to try to get Panasonic and try to get another corporation coming. That, by the way, is coming to Inola, to the port of Inola, Tulsa Port of Catoosa, Inola.
Enel?
Yes, Enel. Okay. And that's an Italian. That's owned by the Italian government. They are an energy company. They're second only to a corporation in China.
Okay.
They're a huge company. They've already been in Oklahoma with wind generation, through windmills, and then they're looking to put a photocell or what do they call them,
the solar panels? Solar panels,
yeah, right. Solar panels in Inola, manufacturing there.
Yeah.
And that's got to be decided by Inola.
Okay. Well, again, just concerns about carve-outs for specific companies. That's one concern. But then the companies that are coming and what they bring with them. And, an Italian-owned company, owned by the Italian government. Do you know anything else about Enel? I mean, any concerns about, like you mentioned, and it is ironic that we have required the treasurer to disallow companies that are connected to ESG into Oklahoma, yet we're recruiting those companies here. Yes. You're speaking out of both sides of our mouth.
It is. It's a disconnect, and then also it's problematic in that it will change the culture, because they'll have requirements that they want to meet, because it's no longer about maximizing shareholder value.
Yeah.
On your stock price, and you invest in a company that you want the maximum amount of return on that stock purchase. It's all about stakeholder, which makes the political aspect of it a whole lot more important to corporations than it's the wokeness that you see.
Yeah, exactly. That is a buzzword, stakeholder capitalism.
Yes. It's not the same that you and I would consider investable. And you see a lot of these companies that have gone woke and do certain things, and they lose a lot of business.
Yeah. Oh, Bud Light.
Yes, yes.
We were talking earlier about the Babylon Bee clip that said it was a religious guy he bemoaned the fact that he didn't drink Bud Light so he could boycott him. Gotta love Babylon Bee. We're getting close to a break, but I want to go ahead and talk about this health information exchange, the House Bill 1688.
Yes.
And I believe you were a no on this.
Yes, we voted no. I do not like. Oftentimes these things talk about this repository of data, but really very little is talked about who has access to it, where it goes, and what they're accumulating, and how long are they going to retain this data, and then of course who all has access to it, and what can it be used for. Those details aren't always given in the heat of the moment when you're trying to decide. Yeah. On the legislative floor, whether or not to vote for it or not.
Well, we've been in the frog in the frying pan for so long. The heat has slowly been turning up, and we're not seeing it begin to boil around us. And that's all of us, as we have been so accustomed to being monitored and tracked and traced, being recorded on a daily basis with our iPhones or Android. It's all recording us all the time. And we've kind of shrugged our shoulders at this point and said, I'm not afraid of them collecting information on me. I'm not a terrorist. But information is power.
Yes, and I just voted against another bill here last week that referred to biomarkers within a person.
Yeah.
And if they have a higher propensity for some sort of disease, are you going to be rated higher now?
Right.
Because you have these biomarkers? Well, who has access to that information on your biomarkers? Are you going to be rated for something higher for something else? It's just the use of that data and the and somebody keeping it and using it for nefarious.
Well, we saw it happen in our public school system where they were tracing kids and saying, oh, well, you were in the vicinity of someone who might have had COVID, so we're going to require you to quarantine and be at home for the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. They weren't showing any symptoms, not sick, testing negative, but it didn't matter because you were over here, you touched the same pencil that this kid touched who might have had COVID. And so this tracing is very concerning. The fact that they could trace us at all. I'm not a terrorist either. I'm not have this nefarious plot to destroy America, but I want to keep my healthcare information private.
Yes.
And that's why I think that people are concerned about House Bill 1688. Now over in the Senate, Senator Standridge proposed an amendment that would change the shall to a may. Talk about why that's important.
Well, it's required. If you have a shall, then that forces the people to do whatever the legislation says. But a may then is better.
There's choice.
It's better, but then you have to figure out who may and who may not.
Right.
And who's doing it.
What are the conditions around the may?
Yes, and then who do you do this? Yes, we do. And then trying to find somebody that might not do that if you have that option.
Yeah, still not the best choice, but at least it is a little better than before. And so I'm assuming that Senator Standridge is anticipating this moving through the Senate, and he wants to try to insert a provision there last minute to protect as much of our privacy as possible.
Yes, that's a good move by him.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in support of that with House Bill 1688 and this additional amendment that Standridge is putting forward, I would call your senators today and let them know that you are in support of this amendment that Senator Standridge is putting forth on House Bill 1688. This deals with a health information exchange, which would require your health provider to divulge all of the information of their patients and put it on a central database. And now this is available to all unless that healthcare provider opts out. So very concerning. More and more we're moving toward a centralized collection of data. And like we talked about with AI, what does AI do? It just uses that centralized database to make decisions. And we're seeing it with ChatGPT. I haven't used ChatGPT yet, but it's amazing how it can use algorithms that are out there to scan the whole internet and write a paper for you, or write a poem for you, or, write legislation for you. And so more and more people are going to be dependent on AI and ChatGPT, which is also dependent on centralized information. So that's why this is very concerning, because when all the information's out there, it can now be used against you. Maybe it won't, but it could, and that should be a concern.
If you're being profiled that way, what if there is a mistake? How do you go about correcting that?
Right.
How do you get that into the algorithm?
Yeah. And if there's, with states that are, moving forward with red flag laws, if there's any kind of concern about your mental health that may be on this health information exchange, now would that trigger a red flag and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and confiscate your guns because, hey, your psychologist said you have bipolar tendencies.
Yes, or your GPT, whatever that was.
ChatGPT,
the
right.
ChatGPT, the algorithm's incorrect.
Right.
How do you know that? How do you know what? And do you have access to see if it's correct?
Yes. It's something we all need to get more and more educated on and up to date on. Man, we're in an information age where things are just exponentially increasing every day, and it's hard to stay caught up. So I want to do my best to bring you the updates every day. I'm trying to catch up, too, and keep my head above water. So, hey, let's work together on this. If you have any information, be sure to send it my way. I'm here with Representative Tom Gann talking about the things impacting Pryor, Oklahoma, out in Mays County, specifically these efforts to bring in big business, talking about TIF reform and the current status of the education tax credit. So if you missed any of it, go back to the freedom969.com website. You can find the prior shows. And, hey, I'm going to come back with some final thoughts right here after the break, right here on the Jake Merrick Show.
The truth about your state every morning, right here on the Jake Merrick Show. The new Freedom 96.9.
All right, guys, welcome back. 7:54 a.m. here with Representative Tom Gann. Tom, tell us what else are you working on right now in the House?
Well, right now I had two bills that were House Bill 1378 and 1379. 78 dealt with non-disclosure agreements, and then 1379 dealt with the TIF committee. The non-disclosure agreements, basically, no government official through the should be involving themselves in secrecy when it comes to taxpayer dollars.
You would think that would be obvious, and that the people would be in support of no elected official having to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Yes. A lot of pushback on that. They said companies won't talk to us if they don't have that. And it's like, well, if companies stay in their lane and develop their product and get out there and do what they do best instead of coming to government, we wouldn't have that problem. And then, of course, the TIF, 1379 covered the TIF, and one of the things in that, the most important thing, was taking it to a vote of the people. If the TIF was approved, it would have to go to a vote of the people because it affects your property taxes and affects your property.
Right.
The biggest pushback on that were local government officials who said if that happened, then we'd never get one.
Because they're interested in economic development, correct?
They think they are.
Yeah. Right. But the interest should be with the will of the people.
Yes, it should be.
And they should have a say in where their tax money is going.
Yes.
So I completely support both of these measures. 1378 and 1379. Does it look like they're going to go anywhere?
Well, they didn't make it through committee this time. They died in committee for lack of a second, but they're still alive to be heard in 24.
Okay.
And they will be back.
Okay, I hope so. And it's amazing that in our Republican House that these things are dying, because they should be obvious. You had 5 points that you wanted to bring out. Well, I think those are good points. But you had another piece of legislation, too.
Yes, 1380, which was the repeal of the LEAD Act.
Yeah.
After the debacle with Panasonic, after that failed attempt, so let's get it back to the people. Let's give it back to the people instead of giving it away.
Well, thank you for that, and I know everyone listening is saying the same thing. Thank you that we have a representative up there who's actually interested in the will of the people. Novel concept, man.
Yes.
It should be obvious in the primary agenda here in Oklahoma, but I'm glad you're up there doing it. Yeah. I want to get to these 5 points that you mentioned, if you would like to.
Sure. The whole premise about there's a fallacy out here that says that a state we have to pay people to come to Oklahoma, and we really don't. Government is not in the business of investing your money. We're not stockbrokers,
right?
And we're not investment people.
They're already interested for certain reasons.
Yes, and so when George Mason University when they perform these studies, and there's a lot of information out that contradicts everything that we're doing. And subsidies, companies are made less efficient when they come and ask for subsidy because they're being subsidized by the taxpayer, and they have less reason to be more efficient. Entrepreneurs are encouraged, instead of developing a product and being most efficient, they're encouraged then to go find them a politician that'll give them a sweetheart deal. And that's unproductive. And then non-subsidized companies, the ones that are there, have to deal with the imbalance in the market that we talked about, and they're harmed because they can't compete, and they have struggled to compete. And then taxpayers foot the bill for all this. It comes out of the taxpayer back pockets, and people can't buy milk, they can't buy gas right now. I mean, inflation is killing everybody.
Yes.
And yet we're more worried about giving it to a corporation that doesn't need it instead of giving it back. And then finally, it puts our communities at risk when we dump in a company of that magnitude and put all our eggs in one basket for a initiative that's not driven by consumer demand, but by the Biden administration through all the money and all the incentives they put down. It puts our community at risk, because when all this is over with and they go back, and it's done, we're going to be left with a huge scar there.
Man, I think it's a great summary of the whole show, of our whole conversation. These subsidies, these public-private partnerships, it throws everything out of balance. It disrupts the free market.
Yes.
It creates lazy entrepreneurs, like you were saying. It puts one company at an advantage over another. So many things wrong with this, but again, it's become more and more the norm. And like the assumption that, hey, our technology is out there, we're being recorded, we're being monitored out there. We've kind of grown accustomed to that as well.
Yes.
So many things that we need to remind ourselves, this is not good. This is not good, and we need to get back to the basics, the fundamentals, like the free market, supply and demand. And you are one of those voices in our capital, reminding of everyone of that, fighting for the people, and I so appreciate you.
Well, thank you and 96.9 for being that conservative voice radio.
Absolutely. That's what we do every day on the Jake Merrick Show. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Never forget the sovereignty of your person, your state, or your God.